Thinking back to the time as a classic series Doctor Who action figure collector, where having a classic Tardis Exterior box as a part of your collection was considered a big deal because all of the previous Forbidden Planet exclusive TARDISes were considered incredibly rare and sought after by Doctor Who collectors. Yet here we are, it is the summer of 2020, and we're adding yet another classic Tardis Exterior box to our collections.
You're joking. Not another one?
This time round based around the 1960s TARDIS and packaged alongside a second Doctor as portrayed by Patrick Troughton, this time a collector set from the final second Doctor story, being the War Games. The recommended retail for this product is £19.99, much like all of the other collector sets that have been released this year, and it is exclusive to B&M stores throughout the UK. There is also additional stock that has been made available in both America as well as Australia. The packaging style guide is exactly the same to what we've come to expect with this series over the past few years, with the Doctor Who logo at the very top, as well as stating that this is a part of the 5.5 scale collector series. As per usual, there is a massive window displaying the figures on the inside of the box, as well as a graphic design of the TARDIS exterior. And then at the bottom we have the title of the set, as well as the B&M limited edition sticker. All of the other sides of the box basically repeat exactly the same information, however on the back we do have an image of the prototype for this set, as well as stating that this is from the War Games from 1969, an episode written by Terrance Dicks and Malcolm Hulke. And to finish off the box we have a lovely synopsis write-up for the War Games, giving the general idea of the plot. Again, a nice thing to pad out the back of the box, and to kind of home in on the fact that this is for collectors. And the excitement of cardboard with things printed on it continues, as on the inside of the box we have an exterior shot of, I do believe, outside the trial room from the War Games, with some nice colours and things floating around, and if you so wish you could display the figures inside this. As per usual, a lovely touch and a great unique thing to add to this set. So here we have the latest TARDIS exterior model to add to the collection. Now something that I've noticed is every time a Doctor and TARDIS set comes out, when the initial images are released, I always think, is that TARDIS necessary? And then I go and buy it and I'm still a little bit undecided, very much like the Monster of Peladon TARDIS from earlier on in 2020. And then after a few days of having it, you start to like it more and more, and that is definitely the case of this TARDIS here, because initially when I picked it up, I wasn't particularly too impressed. I didn't think it was anything that special. However, now I've got it in hand, and now I've seen it next to some of the other TARDISes that have been released, it's not that bad. It's different, it has some visual details that are unique, and of course we have that rather exciting lamp at the very top, which is of course a brand new sculpt. And of course for those more recent collectors who are yet to have a normal looking second Doctor to add to their collection, this set also makes for a perfect opportunity, as the previous B&M release of the second Doctor was the Androgum with the giant orange eyebrows, which looks not very normal to say the least. So firstly, starting off with the second Doctor as portrayed by Patrick Troughton. Now for those of you that have second Doctor figures, you know exactly what to expect, because this is the same base sculpt that we've seen all the way back until 2009, and it is the same as every other second Doctor. However, as always with the B&M line, we do have a few upgrades in the paint application to make it look ever so slightly like a different costume, to give you a rough idea of what has generally changed, and it is the same thing really that we come to expect on variants of the second Doctor, where we have a change in a handkerchief and shirt. So starting off we have of course the 11 Doctor set version here, we have the original version from 2009 and the B&M 2019 Two Doctors version. So on these two we have a light blue shirt, on this one we have a very vibrant blue shirt, and then on the latest version we have a white shirt. We also have a more vibrant blue tie compared to the darker one on the three Doctors, and the slightly darker blue on these two here. And then as for the checkered trousers, as per usual again we have a variation in the design, however it is the same basic idea. Unlike the vast majority of previous releases, we have a solid white shirt in the middle of the action figure, which does in fact remind me of the initial Daypole variation of the second Doctor many years ago. Due to this being white as opposed to a lighter blue, some of those smaller details have been lost, such as paint application on the buttons. However, overall we have your usual collar at the top, and of course a few creases and wrinkles along the sculpting of the buttons running down the middle. As per usual, the bow tie has been painted blue, this time round a rather light blue, with the white polka dots added on top, which again for a B&M set, this has been rather precisely painted. We also have the inclusion of the handkerchief with a rather solid vibrant red compared to some of the previous releases, and then of course we have the jacket over the top, which again is the same sculpt to usual, and we have the lapels of course coming around the side, the buttons running up the middle, and a series of creases, and of course those rather large baggy pockets there at the very bottom. The same does also apply for the back. We have the same details that you would come to expect on any Character Options action figure, including a few stitching lines and the buttons, and overall there's not really too much to talk about. However, the most obvious difference is that a wash has now been applied to the jacket, which is rather rare. It's not been seen on the vast majority of the other releases. However, I think it works well. It definitely brings out some of those details, especially with the creases and wrinkles within the pockets there at the very bottom, and of course a few more of those wrinkles as we move up the jacket overall. So the wash is in fact rather welcome and sets this figure apart from some of the others. Moving further down the figure, we have the inclusion of the checkered trousers, which have a lighter grey base colour, and of course the darker grey of the checkers applied over the top, and then of course the same applies for the back as well. The main notable difference for this figure is that we have a little bit of a wash that has been applied, of course a rather large wash in fact, especially around the lower half, to give the impression that the second Doctor has been rolling around in some mud or something like that. I'm presuming that he was rather worse for wear within his final story, and that is definitely represented on this action figure. One of the most unique details to stand this figure apart against some of the previous second Doctors is that we have a little bit of damage to the trousers around the knee section, which has simply been recreated by using a slightly darker colour to give the representation that the material has been ripped. I suppose this is nice and unique, and again different, so I'm all for variety, especially on these variants. The shoes have been sculpted in your standard lighter brown plastic with a few details on there, with a few creases and things. However, generally nothing too much to talk about. As for the likeness to Patrick Troughton, as always, this sculpt fails to disappoint because it is absolutely brilliant. Once again, we have some lovely details on the face. Very clearly, it is Patrick Troughton. We have, of course, his trademark, rather pointy nose, and in there as well, we also have a few creases coming around the side of the face to really emphasise the mouth. Equally, we also have the eyes in there as well, which have been sculpted and set back ever so slightly into the face, and the paint application and colour palette overall, in fact, reminds me of the original release way back in 2009, especially the way that we have that darker black line that has been applied around the sides of the eyes, and of course the eye whites there in the very middle, which have been given a rather darker paint application. In the original version, the eyebrows did seem to be ever so slightly more quizzical, as you can see there, to the extent of almost being angry. I've never quite noticed that. However, I think that generally it gives the sculpt a bit more personality and character. This version kind of seems to be a more serene or neutral variation of the second Doctor. However, it definitely looks like him. One of the things I am a little bit unsure about, however, is the black dark line that has been applied to the mouth. It almost looks like his mouth is a dark abyss that seeps into his face as opposed to being a thin black line. It seems to be ever so slightly thicker than personally I think it should be, especially when compared to, again, the original version, which did seem to be ever so slightly more subtle, bringing out a few of those smaller details a bit more. As for Troughton's Beetle style haircut, once again, this is the same to usual, where we have a few minor sculpting details to represent the different strands of hair. Coming around to the opposite side, again, we have the cut of the hair coming across the top of the forehead, and the same pretty much applies for the opposite side as well. Something that may have been nice to see is an ever so slight grey wash applied to the top of this, just to bring out those strands of hair detailing a bit more. I think that when you put a grey wash on, you kind of nearly fall into the category of making the second Doctor look ever so slightly aged, which is the risk of using a highlight. However, for the most part, I think it works okay. It is also worth pointing out, much like the vast majority of classic series Doctors who don't come with sonic screwdrivers, this B&M second Doctor does not come with the second Doctor's flute. However, if you have the original flute from any of the other releases, then you can rather handily display that flute with this figure. So in conclusion, for the second Doctor, to be honest, it's a decent variant. I actually think that the paint application in particular is very sharp on this release. As I mentioned before, the paint on the face actually reminds me of the original way back from 2009, and I think that some of those details really do bring out the character within his face, especially around the eyes. And naturally, if you've missed out on those original versions, this does make for a perfect opportunity to add yet another incarnation of the Doctor to the shelf. And of course, he will look brilliant alongside alongside the many Cybermen and Daleks from his era. So now moving on to the second Doctor's Tardis Exterior box. Now, as per usual, this uses exactly the same sculpt to all of the previous Tardis releases, and this is yet another Tardis box to, of course, have the flat roof, as this is another Peter Bruckraki variant. And I think that this is probably, it should be the last one that we see of the flat roof, because I and quite a lot of other collectors that I know are now getting pretty bored of this design. Now, still, I think that it is perhaps best to go now onto the stack roof versions from the 80s, as opposed to hanging around this TARDIS, because yes, it does have a new lamp, which is all very exciting. However, at the same time, we've seen perhaps a bit too much of this box by this point. Now, I don't often like to start off reviews with a little bit of a complaint. However, this part of the review will start off with a little bit of a complaint relating to the packaging. For those of you that have collected these TARDISes before, you will know a plastic band is used to keep the doors shut when the TARDIS is in the box. This has now been removed and replaced with some sellotape, which is all well and good. However, said sellotape, when taken off the TARDIS, is in fact ripping off some of the wash that has been applied, and in fact it even ripped off some of the colouring on the window pane, which is rather annoying, and even now it has in fact left behind a little bit of a residue from the stickiness of the sticky tape, which I've tried to wash off. However, it is still there, which is a bit annoying. All of this is made ever so slightly worse because the removal of the plastic band is meant to prevent the doors from warping. However, this TARDIS is the most warped door TARDIS that I've had in the entire history of the line. Just tilting towards the side there, as you can see, the doors are ever so slightly warped outwards, especially around the midpoint, which yeah, is a bit frustrating to say the least. On a more positive note, we have the inclusion of a new lantern at the top of the TARDIS roof, which in a very similar manner to that of the Barry Newbury TARDIS, that also received a brand new light, it works to this TARDIS's benefit. It makes the TARDIS overall look visibly different compared to all of the others, and for that reason there is kind of an incentive to buy it. In reality, this has just been shoved on top of the plinth of the usual TARDIS sculpt, and to be honest, it works very well. We have kind of this impression it is all one sculpt. However, we've got the lid that has been painted with that circular section at the very top, and then on all four sides we have these painted paint applications to give the impression of struts holding the lamp overall together. And to be honest, it works very well. Of course, this TARDIS isn't electronic, so there isn't a light or anything in the very middle, but it gives the illusion that it could light up. The TARDIS overall has been moulded in what is pretty much a very dark blue, almost black plastic, creating this illusion of a very dark police public call box. However, a wash has been applied over the top of this to give it a kind of grey tint, almost looking like a TARDIS under a black and white filter, very much like how it would have been within the 1960s of Doctor Who. And again, this is a different shade to all the other TARDISes and will of course look different on the shelf. As per usual, this TARDIS box has been littered with this wood-grained texture all the way around all four sides to create the impression that it is of course made of wood. Along the back we do also have the inclusion of the battery compartment as well as the speaker grille. However, something that is worth noting as always, this TARDIS is not electronic, it is a budget set, and of course at the very bottom we do also have the inclusion of the thinner base that was of course originally present on the 5th Doctor and 4th Doctor Sharded TARDIS, to give the impression that this TARDIS is more squat compared to all of the others, and generally I quite like this base sculpt. As always, on the midpoint of the doors we do have the inclusion of the pull to open sign. The base colour of this, as well as the border running around the edges, is exactly the same to the rest of the TARDIS box, so it fades in nicely, and we do of course have the rather clear lettering that has been printed on top, saying all of your usual jargon, free for public use, all of that stuff, pull to open, which this time round is in the italics, and it is pretty much exactly the same lettering from what I can tell on the Season 12 TARDIS, so again a nice inclusion and very much of the era. Towards the opposite side we also have the inclusion of the door handle as well as the lock, which have been given a silver paint application to make them stand out. Of course, no doubt, if you've got multiple classic TARDISes before, you know exactly what to expect now. We have opening doors, how exciting indeed. Of course, both of these do open to reveal absolutely nothing on the inside of the TARDIS, which is accurate to 1960s Doctor Who, as there was no backdrop. We do have the reveal, though, however, of the non-existent battery compartment around there. Of course, you do need to pull and open the door by yourself on this side here. However, of course, you do have the button on the base of the TARDIS to close the main door, as so. As I mentioned previously, the entire body of this TARDIS does seem to have a grey wash over the top, and the most obvious place that this can be seen is on the window panes. As per usual, this has been sculpted in a clear plastic with a white sheet added in behind this. Now, as per usual, the bottom two panes are of course frosted, and the remaining panes are a standard clear smooth plastic. Have the outer frame of the window, this has been coloured to be exactly the same colour as the rest of the box to make it fit in more seamlessly. For the top of this we have the wash that has been applied. Now in some areas this is more prominent than others. As we can see here, some of the almost dirt design has collected in the bottom corners to make it look like it has been thrown about a few quarries here and there, and again this will vary between each individual TARDIS, especially when you have a piece of tape glued across the middle, ripping across half of the weathering. Ugh. Other than that, I like the weathering, and it definitely gives a little bit more texture to this TARDIS and brings out a few further details. And finally, for detail, we have the inclusion of the police public call box signage. Now, arguably, I'm a bit more excited by this, even compared to the brand new light sculpt, because this is something that I've wanted to see on a classic series TARDIS for so many years. On the front of the TARDIS, we have a white background that has been used, and a very bold text for the police public call box lettering. Again, a wash has been applied over the top of this to give it a general weathered feel. I think that this works very well. As we can see, it stands out especially on that darker blue base colour. As we turn to the sides of the TARDIS, we have varied signage. Finally, we have a black base colour with the whiter text applied across the top, and again a wash applied on top of that, and the same applies for the other three sides. It's in fact present on some of the previous TARDISes, or at least it should have been, however it wasn't. They always go with one police public call box signage design for all four sides, and it is great to finally see this added, because it just makes this TARDIS have a bit more character compared to all of the others, and I'm very happy to see it included indeed. And to finish off this review, I've gave up character. I'm not going to be putting all of the TARDISes on the review stage anymore, because there are simply too many of them. Here is the other TARDIS added with all of the other TARDISes, and as we can see, they're all many different shades of blue, which justifies purchasing them over and over again. To be honest, my personal favourites are the 5th Doctor TARDIS, as well as the Barry Newbury and the initial 1st Doctor TARDIS that was a Forbidden Planet exclusive. 2nd Doctor TARDIS is an alright inclusion to the collection, and that new lantern definitely stands out amongst all of the others. And there we have it, the conclusion of another classic series Doctor and TARDIS collector set review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. In summary for this set, it's a very unusual one, because I think that if this set was released a number of years ago, I would have perhaps appreciated it a bit more. By this point, especially with the release earlier on this year of yet another 3rd Doctor and TARDIS from the Monster of Peladon, even though it was an alright variant, I think that by this point, I myself as a collector, I'm getting ever so slightly tired of TARDIS exterior boxes. I think that the TARDIS overall is alright. I like the colour scheme that has been used. It's a rather unusual mix between colour and black and white. I also love the inclusion of the variation within the police public call box signage, having the white at the front and the darker colours around the other three sides. And of course the lantern is a very welcome feature to make this TARDIS stand out. It's decent, it's a decent box, however it's just not particularly that exciting. As for the 2nd Doctor, I think that that kind of applies once again. It's not particularly that exciting. It's just another 2nd Doctor that is a rather similar colour to all of the other 2nd Doctors. It makes for an alright variant, as visually eye-catching, for example, as the regenerated 5th Doctor from the Caves of Androzani TARDIS set, or even the Green Bottle 3rd Doctor from the set that was released earlier this year. Had, for example, there been a bit more budget for this set and they added in, I don't know, a Power of the Daleks 2nd Doctor with a retooled head, the Power of the Daleks hat, then maybe this set would have been an essential. However, for me as a collector, if you like TARDISes, then no doubt you've bought this one already, but I would definitely question by this point, what TARDISes do you like? Do you like the look of the product? Do you want to add it to your shelf? And if that is a yes, then definitely go out and buy it. However, if it's a TARDIS that you kind of think, I'm not necessarily as much of a fan of this one, then perhaps it's something that is worth missing out on. But again, overall, it's an alright set, a decent variant, however, not particularly one of the exciting ones. So thank you very much for watching this review of the 2nd Doctor and TARDIS from the War Games. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week, as well as of course other B&M exclusive 2020 reviews. So thanks for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.